Thank you, Program Director. Let me extend our deepest condolences to the family and friends of Nosicelo, especially her father, Kholisile, and her mother, Ntombizandile. On behalf of our ministry, the minister, and also on behalf of our government, we really want to send these heartfelt condolences to you. And we also want to say to you that this is also our loss, and I think many of the speakers have reflected on how we've been robbed of a future star of this nation. Now and then, the national anger is aroused when attention is brought to the gruesome violence and killing and rape targeted at women. The program director made a remark about how in the streets of social media, the answer is, well, the question is usually asked, what did she do to deserve this? And when this national anger is aroused, we all gather in aghast and collectively join in mourning and condemnation of the perpetrators of such violent act, or rather of the victims of such violent acts. And yet we conveniently forget that collectively as a society, especially we as men, are culpable to this atrocious crime. The list of women, especially students who have lost their lives to the barbarism of men, goes on. We remember Zolile Khumalo of Mangosuthu University was brutally murdered by her boyfriend in May 2018. We also remember Palisa Madiba of the University of Johannesburg, Jesse Hess of CPUT, Precious Ramabulana of Capricorn TVET colleges. And yet the question was asked even then, what is it that they've done to deserve this? And the only common factor between all of this is that they are women. And that those who are killed because of their gender or sexual orientation or sexual preference are precisely killed because they have a vagina. And some of those who are killed because they are gay are killed because they behave like those who have a vagina. And some of those who are killed because of corrective rape, because they are women or lesbian, are killed precisely because they sleep with people who have a vagina. In many cultures, as going through most of this, that families and tribes mourn because women gave birth to a girl, because the preference is that we should have a boy. And these are some of the cultures that have been built into our system that reinforces patriarchy, that reinforces male domination, that reinforces the fact that the male or the man remains superior than all other genders. And that anybody else who have a different genital is therefore less of a human being. And this is why we are where we are today. And today, as a nation, we're grappling with this blood-curdling detail of the murder of yet another young woman. And while we're still processing the news of the death of many women, and I must say that yes, collectively we mourn because some say it happened during National Women's Month. But the question that should go deeper into our conscience is, are we only mourning collectively this death because it happens on National Women's Month, because of the gruesomeness of the nature of the death, and yet we keep quiet when some of these things are happening behind closed doors, when we as neighbors, as street mates, as fellow students, as fellow workers, as we go into shebeens and everywhere else in social spaces, some of these acts happens on a daily basis, and yet we keep quiet and only choose to speak out because this was gruesome. I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have killed my girlfriend because she cheated on me. I wouldn't have spent the night with her dead body. I wouldn't have gone the following day to go and do some of the things that we've had as based on the police account. That we want to dissociate ourselves from those acts precisely because we believe that we're more human and more men, and that our exploitation and abuse and neglect and avoiding the fact that women are killed, and that we as a society collectively, and particularly we as men, are contributing towards that systemic violence that is targeted against women precisely because they were born with the wrong genitals. And we believe that we're entitled to that. So the story of Nosicelo is part of the broader story of women in our country who today have to live with the reality that they can be attacked, raped, and murdered anywhere and at any time of the day. And this story and many others reminded me of the words of Sierra Waters in her book titled Debbie, when she wrote, and I quote, "Today I wore a pair of faded old jeans and a plain gray baggy shirt. I hadn't even taken a shower, and I did not put on an ounce of makeup. I grabbed a worn-out black oversized jacket to cover myself with, even though it is warm outside. I've been conscious, or I've made a conscious decision lately to look like less of what I felt a male would want to see. I want to disappear." Close quote. These are loud words of women shouted in silence. I want to disappear. We rob them of their agency, of their freedom, of their will to live because we've become part of a gang whose last resort is that of satisfying the urge for violence and to target women. This fear of being attacked, of being raped, is part of the daily reality of women in South Africa, and we as men do not know what it means to exist in the body of a woman in South Africa, and in particular, the body of a black woman. And so, like Sierra Waters, many women feel that they want to disappear, and that's the only way within which they can survive, and they will not be killed, they will not be chopped up and be left on the corner street of some suburb in East London or anywhere else in the country. Like many other stories of violence against women by men, the story of Nosicelo forces us to ask ourselves serious questions about the type of society we are, where we make women feel that they should shrink themselves to the point of disappearance just so that they do not die, just so that they are not raped, just so that they are not killed. But most importantly, it forces us as men to ask ourselves even deeper and harder questions. Why is it that we have become the rapists and murderers of women in our society? For those who remain alive, remain targets for their survival, they just want to disappear. And once they are killed, we ask the question, what did they do to deserve it? At the heart of these questions are other more fundamental questions. Are we saying it is okay for young girls and women in South Africa to live in constant fear? Are we saying that it is fine for us to just wait for moments like this to express our collective outrage and thereafter go on with our lives? She lived in a community. She lived in a block of flats. There should have been neighbors. There should have been someone who had something that was odd. Did we just keep quiet and say it is a private matter? Do we just let it go and say that it is none of our business? Did we just say that it is across the wall and therefore we should not interfere? And we need to be asking ourselves this deeper question. Yes, the community, upon learning of all of this, informed the police, which is what we need to see happening in order for government to be able to do its part to end this atrocious murder and killing of women. But importantly, collaboration between communities and the police is going to be very, very crucial. As institutions of higher learning, we're part of the broader society. And that which happens out there is, or that which happens in our institution is but a reflection of what happens out there. And violence is going to be the order of the day if we do not deal with it everywhere else outside of our institutions of learning. And that students or young people in general mimic those things that they see out there. That young men and their attitude and their behavior is reinforced firstly by what they see at home, what they hear amongst their friends, and sometimes, in fact, in most instances, what gets reinforced by cultures and traditions, some of them we really need to take a look at. And I think that this is probably that wake-up call for us to ask ourselves these questions. Are some of the things which we continue to do, which place young men and men in general at this level in society of superiority, precisely because of the culture of patriarchy? Do some of those cultures, are they relevant? Should we not be asking ourselves whether those cultural practices should continue as they are? I mean, the most basic of those is the exchange of dowry, and whatever its origin in our cultures is, to a certain extent, it has now meant that some men believe that precisely because they've paid for lobola for this woman, therefore they are entitled to do anything and everything with this woman, including, if needs be, and if they believe that they are justified, to take their lives. Yes, we've done a lot more as government, and I've had you Deputy Chair of Council. We've done more as government in order to ensure that we zoom in on the question of gender-based violence, including introducing a national a national strategic plan, investing resources, establishing regional courts which are specifically targeted at sexual offenses. We've reviewed legislation in this regard to ensure that harsher sentences are directed to those who commit sexual offenses. But it is not enough, or it is not only about setting up these institutions. It is about challenging the behavior which has become accepted. It is about ensuring that we collectively as a society systematically deal with the problem of patriarchy, for instance, that we systematically deal with the whole issue of gender-based violence, and that we begin to deconscientize, particularly men in our society, and deal with all of these issues around entitlement and all of that, which are as a result, or which as a result leads to the killing of women in our society. In a conclusion, I know profs asked me if I can speak for 10 minutes. Yes, I can, even lesser. But in conclusion, Prof, we really want to applaud what the university has done. Firstly, in giving the necessary support to the family. And secondly, the kind of responses to the public that we've given. We understand that you've been under tremendous pressure as a university, particularly because of some of the misinformation that has gone out in terms of the role of the institution and the circumstances around the murdering of Nosicelo. We really want to applaud you and your team for what you've done. And we also really want to applaud the community who collaborated with the police. We want to applaud everyone who's played a role, particularly also including the provincial government, for the role that they've played in helping us to respond to this particular incident. Our attitude, over and above the policies and programs that we've put in place, our attitude has to be zero tolerance towards gender-based violence. We have to ensure that no student is killed in our campuses because their biggest crime is that they have a vagina. Our attitude must be that of zero tolerance towards gender-based violence in our society in general. We cannot have any more mother and father mourning because their daughter died at the hands of a patriarch, of a murderer, and to the point wherein we all join in this national collective anger and collective mourning. We have to turn this anger, we have to turn this mourning into action and say enough is enough. Thank you very much.